The first part of Doctor Who Season 1's finale is now here, with shocks and surprises and revelations galore. But what did I make of the legend of Ruby Sunday? In a nutshell, this episode definitely delivered. I mean, oh my goodness, that cliffhanger was just incredible. I was on the edge of my seat throughout the episode, kind of anticipating that moment, kind of thinking to myself, is it going to come? Are they really going to do this? Are they really going to bring that character back? At the same time, I'm very conscious of the fact that nothing much actually happened in the story in itself. It was very, very much, a part one to a finale where it's both addressing the overarching story arcs and kind of summarising everything we know so far for the benefit of new viewers, perhaps, whilst also very much building to that cliffhanger and setting things up for part two, getting all the pieces in place, etc. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a very, very good time with it. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of the story. We will build up to that cliffhanger and that reveal, much like the episode did. But we begin, obviously, with the TARDIS coming back to UNIT, and with this established kind of UNIT family of characters. Some old characters in there, some new ones as well. Rose Noble, somehow now working for UNIT, even though she's technically a child. We have another very, very lengthy scene set in the new kind of UNIT ops room, and much like in The Giggle, it seems like every time they use this set, to make it viable and worthwhile, they have to literally do like a 10-minute scene. And I did enjoy that, I enjoyed seeing the set again and all these characters, and it's nice to have this rapport between the Doctor and these characters, saying hello to Colonel Ibrahim or whatever, and to Rose and to Kate. It's really nice to have this kind of semi-recurring cast of characters, or like a carousel of characters, some stay, some go, whatever. But yeah, that kind of ensemble cast feel that this has, it is very, very nice, because you've got Kate there, obviously, she's been there since 2012. And as a long-time Doctor Who fan, it's just so satisfying to see UNIT, being treated this well, to have this massive set and all these characters and being such a central part of the show. It really feels like with this new era, with Russell back and with the Disney budget as well, they've truly been able to unlock the potential of UNIT as a kind of concept, which has always been there over the years, but the budget has never been there to kind of quite have it realised on this scale. To go back to that point from the beginning, I kind of said about how the episode doesn't really advance things at all, it kind of just summarises everything we know. I think this scene is a kind of prime example of that, where we get a recap of the whole Susan Twist / Susan Triad thing, we get a recap of the mystery of Ruby's birth and her origins as well. It's quite exposition heavy. I didn't necessarily dislike that, because it was nice to kind of see all those things on the big UNIT screens and to kind of see this whole team of people working on all these mysteries. But it did feel a little bit weird, a little bit kind of contrived as well, with things like, Ruby's VHS, which has apparently been there all along, and she's kind of never thought to mention it until now. The other thing I found really interesting about this sequence is the way the show was so aware of itself, and aware of these ongoing mysteries, and aware of fan discourse and fan theories and speculation. It felt like quite a departure, I think, for a Russell script to be so aware and to be addressing all that stuff that happens kind of outside of the show, in the show, and for the characters themselves to literally be having those theories and addressing all those different possibilities and drawing attention to certain possibilities, certain options, certain outcomes. Things like with the whole anagram of S-Trad being TARDIS and TARDIS technology. And the whole parallel between Susan Triad and Susan the Doctor's granddaughter as well, which is even mentioned before the titles have actually aired. It felt quite reminiscent of a Moffat script, either for Doctor Who or Sherlock. In that show, you get things very much like this, where Sherlock's kind of band of followers are speculating about how he survived his fall. Or in Series 4, where the show very much addresses the fact that they've been leading you to believe that Sherlock has a secret brother, and it's actually a secret sister. For the show and the characters to acknowledge all that stuff, and to do it so early on, even before the titles, I thought was a real departure for Russell and for a Russell script. It gave it a very, very different feel from the off. It kind of made you sit up in your seat and think, oh my god, what's going on here? Of course, anybody familiar with Doctor Who, or even just television more broadly, would have kind of guessed pretty early on that these two things being telegraphed, the anagram thing with the TARDIS and Susan Triad potentially being the Doctor's granddaughter, are actually just red herrings. There is no way they're going to mention the actual answers to these mysteries so early on in the story. But it was nevertheless exciting, it made the episode exciting, it made you kind of think to yourself, oh okay, if it's not these things, then what is it going to be? In terms of the rest of the episode, like I say, not a lot actually happens, or not a lot that we haven't seen before. So for example, we have this whole thing with the time window, a fantastic set, a fantastic visual effect. we return to the church on Ruby Road. That whole kind of sequence is played out again. It looks very cool, it looks very nice, and it's a very tense sequence and quite scary towards the end as well with Colonel Chidozi. But it doesn't actually advance things with Ruby and her mother and her origins. You know, the whole sequence does feel a little bit pointless in hindsight, you know, beyond the kind of fear factor and the way it kind of builds the tension to that cliffhanger. And the fact that they're kind of continuing to hold back the identity of Ruby's birth mother, you know, is a bit frustrating and makes me think that perhaps that mystery is going to be a bit of an anticlimax, and not necessarily in a bad way, but in the sense that she's actually just going to be a very ordinary human being, unconnected to all this stuff going on around her. It's a weird one with this story because, you know, it was very exciting, it was very thrilling. I'm not sure how much substance there was to it, though, beyond that and beyond kind of the building anticipation, the building tension. There were some nice character moments here and there, like the conversations the Doctor has with Kate and Mel. There are also some nice kind of interactions and different combinations of characters who haven't met before, haven't been in the same room before, like Rose, you know, going with Ruby back to her flat, or Mrs. Flood coming into the flat and looking after Cherry Sunday, and the whole thing there with her latest kind of ominous delivery to the camera. The whole story kind of had a feel of something like Army of Ghosts, even down to the companion's mother kind of coming back with them to the big secret base to kind of get involved in the action. But by far the most exciting part of this episode was the end, or kind of more specifically the final 5-10 minutes or so. It's just building and building to that cliffhanger with different reveals and different things going on. I've got to give it to Russell, it was just so well done, so expertly done. Just starting off with the Doctor kind of, you know, going along with Mel to Susan Triad's speech, and that kind of interaction between the Doctor and Susan where she seems to remember all these different personas she's had, and it's like, you know, what's going on here? At the same time, you have the whole thread back at Unit with the TARDIS. This reveal that the TARDIS back in 2004 in the VHS has something attached to it. And then the reveal that the TARDIS still has something attached to it in the present day, and it's there in the room with them. The big bad has been there in the room all along. And like I say, the way it kind of built to that reveal and to the cliffhanger was so exciting, proper edge of your seat stuff. I think this is the most excited / shocked / surprised I've been by a big Doctor Who cliffhanger since the return of the Master in Spyfall Part 1. There have been similar exciting moments in episodes over the past few years, but usually those are things that we kind of knew about in advance, like the return of the Toymaker, or things that had leaked, like the Bi-Generation. The return of Sutekh is an interesting one because that hadn't actually leaked per se. I think a lot of fans had kind of looked at the whole S-Triad technology thing and Susan technology, Sutekh, and kind of guessed that and worked that out already. It was certainly kind of on my radar. But at the same time, I wasn't kind of going into this episode thinking this is definitely going to be the one where Sutekh returns. I wasn't getting my hopes up or anything like that. So it did still come as a genuine shock, a genuine surprise. I think the first time I cottoned on was in that time window scene where you hear that voice speaking through Colonel Chidozi and you're like, is that Gabriel Wolf? And like I say, it was just so well done, so well executed anyway. There was so much else going on as well, like it was a genuinely scary sequence with those sort of weird faces that Susan Triad and Harriet had. I think in particular the moment where Susan puts her head in her hands and shakes it around and you just know there's going to be some sort of reveal, and then you see that face with the sunken eyes and kind of skeletal look, and it's just so terrifying. It was great. I was less convinced by the whole sort of CGI dog redesign thing going on with Sutekh himself. I do hope that is just one of his many forms, and we're going to see a kind of more traditional look for him next week, a kind of refreshed version of the original Pyramids of Mars design. And great as it is to see Sutekh again, it does feel like a bit of a random choice in the context of everything else going on, like this villain who's to do with sand and deserts and stuff. And at the same time, we have the whole mystery surrounding Ruby's origins, which is very much to do with Christmas and snow. But maybe that'll make more sense next week. In summary, this was a really exciting episode, a really exciting one to watch at midnight. I was on the edge of my seat throughout. It was a bit of a nothing story in terms of actual plot and kind of developing and progressing the plots. But it was great to see all these returning characters again, and my god, it was great to see Sutekh again. I'm so excited to see where they go with that next week. What did you think of The Legend of Ruby Sunday? Be sure to let me know down in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, please do leave a like, and subscribe to the channel if you're new for more stuff like this in the future. But otherwise, until the next one, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye for now.